beautiful baddies. Welcome back to yet another episode of Your Inner Baddie Speaking. Let's just get right into it. So this week is all about establishing boundaries, which I think for me as like 100% a former people pleaser, this was probably one of the hardest, I'd say, aspects of my inner baddie journey. Like, I think there's a lot of things that as I was building my confidence and starting to pour more love into myself and discovering who I am, who I want to be, and really working towards that woman that I want to become, I think there's a lot of pieces of the journey where it felt a little bit more like, okay, I know how to do this, or this isn't as uncomfortable, or even if I knew it was going to be an uncomfortable path to eventually achieve it, like I could see it and I could envision it, and so it was more helpful for me to like take those steps to get there. Whereas being a people pleaser for the majority of my life, it was really hard to break that habit. And I think anyone who's been in that position, who's been a people pleaser, or who was raised in an environment where you were constantly hyper vigilant and feeling like you had to be on the lookout for certain behaviors to make sure that you were never doing anything wrong necessarily. You were always trying to be like perfect, basically, to make sure that anything, like to basically try to control your external surroundings and make sure that you were never upsetting anybody. You were always making sure that you were doing your best to make them happy so that they would not ruin the mood, ruin the day, like ruin the whole peace in the household, or worse, make you the target of all of their emotions, all of their behavior, whether it be for a day, for a week, for a month, for your life. I mean, it's one of those things where if you've been in it, you understand how much you're always playing on the defense, how much you are constantly fitting into a box or doing what you should be doing, or fitting whatever mold you feel you have to do, or being as invisible as you have to be to make sure that no one is going to be upset because of you. And growing up in an environment like that where you're constantly hyper vigilant, you are really not tending to your own needs or your own emotions. You're really tending to others to make sure that you are pleasing them so that they in turn are okay for the day, or they don't get angry, or nothing bad happens, basically. And because you're doing all of that, you're not taking care of yourself, you're not paying attention to your emotions, you're not setting any sort of boundaries, because those don't exist in that survival mode. Those don't exist because you have to play a role in order to appease someone else, or at least that's how it feels as a kid. You feel like if I just act right, or if I just become invisible, or if I just do nothing and stay out of their way, then I won't get in trouble, or I won't cause a fight, or I won't upset the household. Like, you're always living towards other people's emotions. So of course you would never establish a boundary like, no, I don't like that, or no, I'm not gonna do that, or I'm gonna stand up for myself and I'm going to express my emotions and I'm gonna hold firm on that because that is the right thing to do. No, there's none of that when you're growing up in an environment where you're basically taught that you have to please other people in order to exist, or basically, I mean, we'll call it like it is, survive. And that becomes so ingrained in you. If you're doing that from a very young age, I mean, it's no wonder, like, when you're an adult and let's just say you have like a really shitty boss or something, it's no wonder you're not going to feel comfortable establishing boundaries nonetheless holding firm on them. You're going to feel like I got to do everything to please them, and that way that's how I do a good job, or that's how I get a good performance review, or that's how I get the promotion, or that's just how I get through the day, honestly. So of course, like later in life, you're not going to feel comfortable to do that. And so most of my life, even when I was, out of my childhood home or away from certain people who made me feel like I had to live on edge in order to get through and make it. Even though I was away from those factors, the behaviors that I had learned didn't leave me. So I found myself trying to, I'm sure there were instances where I was trying to be like the teacher's pet in college or things like that, because I'm like, well, if I just fits a certain mold, then I will achieve what I need to achieve, rather than maybe holding steady on the fact that or like just accepting things. Like I would just accept a grade that came my way. There's no negotiations, there's no holding firm on my boundaries of my belief that like I did an excellent job and I deserve XYZ because of it, or just like really just backing myself. And so I carried those people-pleasing ways into, friendships, into relationships, into career-wise or education. Like I definitely felt like I had to stay as hyper-vigilant as possible to not rock the boat, to not upset others. And in turn, I was just, now that I was out of survival mode, I was just hurting myself by doing that. I was constantly not enforcing any boundaries, so I let people walk all over me, or I let people do what they wanted because I was so desperate, between people pleasing and abandonment issues, that like I had to appease others in order for them to stay in my life. So it never felt natural and it never felt comfortable to be able to say I don't like something, or to establish a boundary with someone or something. And even if I worked up the courage to do it in my early years of trying to not be such a people pleaser, I wouldn't stay firm on it. I would attempt it once, and if somebody didn't respect it, then I would be like, okay, I tried, which I'm sure is what some people have come up against. I mean, when you're starting to become more confident in yourself, actually voicing your priorities and your worth and your boundaries feels so foreign. It feels like you're upsetting other people. It's as if you've suddenly become the villain. And I've seen plenty of TikToks and reels and content that people have made of like, am I the villain? Oh wait, I'm just like a recovering people pleaser. And it really does feel like that at first, because it's not natural. It's not how you grew up doing it. It's not how you've established prior relationships. So when you start doing it, it feels like friction. And that friction doesn't feel good. So when you start to feel like, oh, I'm the one that's causing that friction, when it's really other people basically disrespecting your boundaries and thinking, I don't have to do that for her or for them or for whoever. I don't have to do it. I can do whatever I want and they'll just deal with it, because that's the behavior that you've displayed prior. So like when you feel that friction, you're like, oh, I'm the one causing it. I'm the one causing the problem, or I'm the one doing this. So I've got to stop. So not only is it hard to establish your boundaries, state a boundary, but then enforcing it, it's fucking hard. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I still sometimes will come up against a boundary of mine and I'll be like, okay, well, I've stated it in my head. I'm like, of course, there's no way I'm this confident woman. I would never let somebody walk all over my boundaries. And then I will let the person that hurt me stay around. And I will accept them back into my life without really having, like, there's no consequences for their actions. And I'm definitely way better at it than I used to be, but every now and again I'm like, what the fuck? Like, that's not how we operate anymore. So it's really difficult. And I think along this journey, there's several steps to establishing boundaries and then enforcing them. One, it's figure out what your boundaries are. And for me, it was every time I was uncomfortable, that was typically because I was letting myself down because I was not enforcing a boundary or I was not stating a boundary. So you have to think of things in terms of like, does it upset me that somebody hears no out of my mouth but does it anyways, and then I don't speak up? That's a boundary that's being crossed. Or I have said that behavior is unacceptable to me and they apologize for it, and they might apologize, they might not, but their behavior doesn't change. So they continue, whether it's immediately after, whether it's down the line, they continue to do that behavior. So that's a boundary that's been crossed, or that's a boundary that you might want to establish is, okay, when I voice that something doesn't negatively affect me or is hurting me, and that person doesn't take it seriously or doesn't take the steps to regain my trust, then that's a boundary of yours, and that's somebody in your life that's crossing that boundary of yours. Or it might be something like in your career, it might be something of a boundary of yours might be people talking over you in meetings, and you need to establish the fact that that's not okay. And I think that happens to a lot of people, especially women in male-dominated fields, of like, you'll definitely get interrupted because they think what they have to say is more important, or let's just be honest, they think that it's better than what you have to say. So standing up for yourself, that could be a boundary. Or let's just say you have a coworker who's taking advantage of the fact that you have an extremely good work ethic, and they're playing on your strengths of being a hard worker and wanting to do good work, and they're a slacker. Let's just say they're a slacker and they're hoping that you will pick up the slack for them because you don't want your department to look bad, or you don't want yourself to look bad, so you'll pick up their slack, and they will take advantage of you not holding firm on a boundary that you're not going to do their job for them. And if you help them a little, and I'm not saying like sometimes you got to help coworkers, and I'm all for helping others because I don't think you can't get anywhere in your career without teamwork. I mean, maybe you can, and if you can, good for you. I have not figured that out yet, but like, I'm all for teamwork. Like, I think if you help others, they'll help you in return, and like, you just never know when you're going to be in a tough spot at your job and you're going to need some help. And I think establishing those dynamics is very good. But like, we all know that person that like, it's like, oh my God, group projects, which are like the bane of my existence, and probably why I'll never get a master's, because I have heard that specifically for marketing, a lot of group projects. And we all know that person that carries the team because either one person slacks like crazy and is never going to do the work, or you get a bunch of those people, and so you're even more frustrated that you're carrying the team. And I've done that for a long time in my youth, so I'm not going to do that anymore. But we all know that person that's like, ooh, they do good work and everybody loves what they do, so they'll do my shit too, right? Or I'm going to see if I can push that boundary and if they'll do it for me. So it can be something like that, where like you have somebody who's trying to see like how far they can push. And same goes for relationships, and I mean both friendships and I mean like romantic relationships. Like, if you have stated, or you feel like you can't voice your emotions, or you feel like you can't speak up, or you can't do certain things because it'll make that person upset. And I'm not saying like, obviously, like if you're cheating on someone and that makes them upset, yeah, that's an obvious no-no. But we're talking about things where like you're not doing anything wrong, but they're treating it as if you have. And so you have to establish what are your boundaries there. You have to establish that, and I truly think that establishing boundaries is directly related to how you let people treat you. And for a long time, I thought people would treat me better the less boundaries I had, because I was flexible for them and I thought they'd be flexible for me, or I was sympathetic to them, or I was empathetic of their situation or how they operated. So I would just let them roam free because I could understand it. But eventually, like, you know, they might apologize, or there's always good times with people, don't get me wrong. So it's not like it's all bad. So you remember those things, like you're looking through things like rose-colored glasses. You're looking at it in a lens that it's better than it is. But every time that you do not decide what your boundary is, act on it, and then enforce it, and do not let people go past that boundary. If they go back, once and they don't know it's a boundary of yours, you have to communicate it. But once they know it's a boundary of yours and you're like, I will not be treated as such because I understand my worth and I understand my value, the second that you've made it known to somebody, if they cross it again, they are trying to see if they can get away with it. They are actively trying to see if you will hold that boundary firm, or if they can take advantage of you. We'll call a spade. And we all know instances where we've definitely said to a friend or a family member, or we have said to partners of ours that, like, that's not okay. Maybe a boundary of yours is like yelling. I grew up with so much yelling, so when I have a man yell at me, it triggers me. It hurts me. I don't think people should yell at you. Of course, I am not a saint. I have gotten angry and yelled at people because that's what I was taught when I was younger, but I have actively done a lot of work to not do that and to communicate in a very calm and effective way, and to not let my emotions take over. But a boundary for you might be like, there is no raising of voices. There is no disrespectful language. There is no, anger really directed at me in a harmful manner. And if you have communicated that to somebody who might have you don't know how they were raised or how they are, but if they cross it and then you tell them that that's not acceptable, and then they do it again, you have to hold firm. You have to let them know that that boundary of yours that you stated is actually something that cannot be crossed. And if you have to write people out of your life because they will not respect your boundaries, that's okay. Because those people are not in your corner. They are not your people. They do not have the best intentions for you. They are not looking out for you. They're looking out for themselves and hoping that you don't notice that they're taking advantage of you. And that can come in many different forms. Sometimes it can come in, you raise a boundary, and it's not necessarily that they apologize, say they won't do it again, and then of course they do it again. It can be in the form of you establish a boundary and they also make you feel bad about that boundary. They might tell you, you might say, you know what, this has actually become a boundary of mine. And I thought back in the day, like, don't get me wrong, I love banter. I really do. I think it's healthy for a relationship. I think it's fun. I think it's like nice to be witty with somebody and go back and forth and share that little like funny moment together. But there's a difference between banter and putting your friend, your partner, your family member, your loved one, whoever it might be, down. There's a difference between having a little fun and being fucking mean to somebody, but saying it's all in fun to basically hide the fact that they actually feel that way about you, but they're gonna mask it as a joke because they don't want you to take offense to it or actually realize their true feelings towards you. So it used to be like, I thought sarcastic banter of like basically a partner just blatantly disrespecting me. I thought that was funny. I thought like, oh, we just take jabs at each other. Or like the same thing with pranks. I think the pranks are like the same equivalent to like banter that's like putting people down, because it's just hurtful. And at a certain extent, you're like, fuck, man, like that's too much. That hurts. I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to feel like you're attacking me or putting me down, or like, damn, you really feel that way about me at a certain point. Like, it's just hurtful. And I used to think that that was like a fun part of a relationship. And then I just realized that like, I was not enforcing a boundary of like, you should talk nice about me. And sometimes when you put up a boundary of like, hey, that went too far, that actually hurts my feelings, I don't want to be talked to like that, they might come back with, you're too sensitive, you can't take a joke, I was clearly joking, you obviously don't understand. And that right there is manipulation to make sure that you do not stick to your boundary. It makes you question your boundary of like, oh, well, maybe he was just joking, or maybe they were just joking, or maybe I should lighten up, or maybe I'm just, upset about something else earlier. So like now that's kind of bleeding into me being upset about this. That is just an excuse for their behavior so that you question it, so that you will not stick firm on that boundary, so they can continue to disrespect you in that way. And the more you let someone do that, the more that it has become an established part of your relationship that is acceptable behavior. And unfortunately, I have been privy to that, and I have allowed that in a lot of my friendships and a lot of my relationships, because even when I finally gathered the courage to establish the boundary, I decided I don't like to be talked to like that, or I don't want to be, subject to those actions, or whatever the boundary might be. I established it, then I decided, okay, I'm going to voice it, so I'm going to say it, and then I didn't stay firm on it. And it can be very small things. A boundary doesn't have to be this like, oh, well, he's clearly a manipulative liar and I don't like liars, and I've said I don't like lies, and then he convinces me that like it's okay and I just accept it. And that doesn't have to be like, I mean, yes, you shouldn't deal with liars, but what I'm saying is that your boundary doesn't have to be something so big as like somebody's manipulating you. It can just be like a boundary of yours can just be something small that you feel like is something that you have to stick strong to. And once you've figured out, and like I said earlier, I usually figured out my boundaries of like when somebody was acting a certain way towards me and I felt really, really uncomfortable. Part of that uncomfortable that I was feeling is I was letting myself down by not sticking to my boundaries. And not only does like establishing and sticking to your boundaries become a direct reflection of like how you let people treat you, it's also how you treat yourself. And I mean that in the sense that figuring out your boundaries is an excellent step. Saying them out loud is a fabulous step. Enforcing them means that you know your worth and you love yourself enough that you will not allow someone to come into your life or something to come into your life and treat you in a way that you know you do not deserve to be treated. And I'm gonna say that, and I must say that again. You are upholding your worth every time you stick to your boundaries. And you are telling yourself that you are worth more every time you establish a boundary. When you say, I don't deserve that, and you go, I don't like that, you are developing your self-worth even further. And that is commendable. Now, establishing them, step 1. Step 2 is actually making your boundaries known, which I know can be very difficult when you're not used to feeling comfortable voicing your opinion or expressing yourself, but it gets easier over time. And then the part that you got to, the follow through, you gotta follow through on enforcing your boundaries, because no one is going to enforce them for you. They might hear it, they might think about it, but they don't know your boundary like you do. And so you have to remind people that that's not acceptable and you're still not going to take that treatment. And if it becomes a routine thing of somebody disrespecting your boundaries, you have to love yourself enough, no matter how much you think that person is funny, or how much you think you're in love with that person, or how much you think that that person you don't want to let go of. And trust me, as someone with abandonment issues, I do not like letting go of people. But if you do not enforce those boundaries to the point where if somebody will not respect them, then they do not respect you, and you have to show them the door. They do not get access to you if they do not respect you. And you have to respect yourself enough to not let others continuously disrespect you. And I know that's probably some tough love to a lot of you who are like potentially realizing, oh shit, I do a lot of this and I haven't really stuck firm on my boundaries, or I haven't voiced them. That's okay. I know it's tough to hear it when you're not out of that yet. I didn't like having to tell myself that the reason I felt uncomfortable in those positions is because I didn't love myself enough to speak up for myself, to hold strong on my boundaries. I was allowing disrespect into my life. And it is a hard pill to swallow when you know that it's you allowing it into your life. But the second that you understand that it's not, you don't have to be against yourself. Give yourself the grace to know that you are likely uncomfortable with enforcing them because of what you've gone through in life, and you had to live a certain way in order to survive, in order to get through, in order to just live. And it sucks that you had to go through that, and it sucks that, you know, people-pleasing behavior or whatever it is that causes you to not establish your boundaries happen to you. And I wish that nobody really had to ever get to that point where they didn't feel comfortable saying what they should to establish their worth and standing on it. I really do wish that no one had to go through that. But the second you wake up and realize, I don't want to keep letting myself do that, I don't want to keep letting myself down, is the second that you respect yourself enough to start the path to not letting others disrespect you. And I'm not saying that people won't try. There's always going to be people who push, who try to see if you'll, especially people who've known you when you didn't have those boundaries in place. They will be very uncomfortable with you suddenly finding your worth and finding your self-confidence. They probably will not like it, and you might find a lot of people in your circle are actually not people that should be in your circle. But that's all okay, because as much as it sucks to find that out, it means that the second you start respecting yourself is the second that you only allow people, things, whatever in your life that reflects that respect. And the second you establish your worth and you stick up for your worth, everybody in your life does the same. They know your worth. Everybody can see it. Even the ones that disrespect your worth, those are probably the ones that see it the clearest. They know your worth. They're just hoping that you don't know it. And that's kind of sad. But it's really, really exciting to know that when you stop accepting the disrespect and you start enforcing all of those boundaries that you know in your heart of hearts that you deserve more, you're on the path to a better fucking life. You're on a path to better fucking friends, better relationships, better everything in your life because you know better, and now you will only allow what's better in your life. You're not going to allow anything that is harmful to you. You're not going to allow anything that disrespects you. You're going to stand on your worth. And that's fucking commendable. So, take a moment, maybe do a little self-reflecting of like what feels uncomfortable to you to establish, what boundaries you want to have in place. Then start acting on those boundaries. Start speaking up, and the more you do it, the more practice you have, the more it will become second nature. I mean, me today, even in my current job, I'm laying down boundaries that me 5 years ago, hell no, I would have taken it on the chin, and I would have probably cried about it later, but no more. We're not doing that. So you stand on it, you act on it, you say it out loud, and you make it known. You make your boundaries known. And then the second somebody tries to cross that boundary again, you enforce it. You let them know there's no way, there's no access to me until you stand on my boundary. Until you recognize that I'm not going to allow that to happen, and you don't allow yourself to act like that around me. And in the end, you're going to have a much better circle and a much better feeling inside, because you're not going to feel uncomfortable anymore, because you're not disrespecting yourself anymore. You're respecting yourself. And I hope that you know that you're worth doing that. All right, guys. Say it with me. I'm a fucking baddie. All right. Love y'all till next time.